This is the My Campaign Coach podcast, where we talk about how to win elections. Every week, we let you hear straight from the best consultants, operatives, and candidates in the game, all for one reason, to help you win. For more information about how we can help you win, visit mycampaigncoach.com. Now, here's your host, Shafer.
Welcome to the How to Run for Office podcast from My Campaign Coach. This week, we're talking about discipline, why it's important, and what it takes to be a disciplined man or woman. I'm going to share a fair amount about my particular struggles and what I'm trying to do to fight back against that, especially this year. With having my son 9 months ago, discipline and leading by example have been front of mind for me, and that's highlighted a lot of my weaknesses in the areas that I have been failing and honestly didn't even realize it. So I'm going to kind of talk you guys through some of the personal inventory that I've done and what I'm trying to do to fight back and become a disciplined person. First, though, I want to give a shout out to JD Bryden and Grant Moody. Both of these guys went over to patreon.com/mycampaigncoach and signed up to be patrons of our show. It didn't take but a minute, and they've each signed up to contribute a few dollars each month, about $1 per episode, to support what we're doing. In addition to that, though, they're going to get special access to some cool perks that are exclusive to our patrons, like live Q&A calls, first shot at special offers, and I'm actually also getting their input on what other things that we give away to patrons should be. So, especially early patrons, you're going to get to help shape that program, and I definitely appreciate every dollar that comes our way. We're putting it right back into getting out great content to y'all every week. Speaking of special offers, I haven't mentioned our online candidate courses in the last probably month or two. I've been bad about that. If you go to learn.mycampaigncoach.com, you can check out both of the courses we have up there right now. The first one is a free one that helps you analyze whether you're ready to run for office and if you have a chance of winning. That's about an hour of video and a couple dozen questions that I walk you through answering, helping you answer along the way to make sure that you're ready and that you can win. The other one is the advanced candidate course, and this one took probably about 2 years of research and development and beta testing some live courses for us to put together, and it's everything from videos, tools, downloads, all kinds of information, all focused on helping you win. And we took that from our live course that we originally had it as and recorded it, and we have some Q&A that's a part of it as well, but it's $249 for lifetime access or $49 a month for however long you need it. I'm really proud of what we put together in those two courses, and I'm confident that making that kind of small investment, whether it's the time for the free course or the money for the paid course, that it's going to be an investment in your political future that's going to pay huge dividends down the line. All right, so discipline. I want to start this off by reading a page or so from Jocko Willink's book, The Discipline Equals Freedom Field Manual. You've heard me talk about Extreme Ownership before, the book that Jocko and Leif Babin wrote, and this is kind of a little more of it's a field manual. It talks a lot about specifics. It was answering a lot of questions that Jocko was getting about the workouts he uses, the way he, how he gets up early, how he stays away from the donuts, all kinds of stuff like that. So a lot of it's just motivational stuff that he's written. The first 2 pages, I think, though, really do a good job of defining what discipline is and why it's important. This is the opening of the book, and it says, the way of discipline. People look for the shortcut, the hack. And if you came here looking for that, you won't find it. The shortcut is a lie. The hack doesn't get you there. And if you want to take the easy road, it won't take you where you want to be. Stronger, smarter, faster, healthier, better, free. To reach goals and overcome obstacles and become the best version of you possible will not happen by itself. It will not happen cutting corners, taking shortcuts, and looking for the easy way. There is no easy way. There's only hard work, late nights, early mornings, practice, rehearsal, repetition, study, sweat, blood, toil, frustration, and discipline. Discipline. There must be discipline. Discipline, the root of all good qualities, the driver of daily execution, the core principle that overcomes laziness and lethargy and excuses. Discipline defeats the infinite excuses that say, not today, not now, I need to rest. I will do it tomorrow. What's the hack? How do you become stronger, smarter, faster, healthier? How do you become better? How do you achieve true freedom? There's only one way, the way of discipline. So in typical Jocko fashion, it's kind of a combination of pump up and simplifying the principle, and it speaks for itself. It's true, at least in my mind, it is. Part of what I wanted to share today and why this has been on my heart so much is that a few months ago, I was doing a kind of a men's retreat as part of the mastermind group that I'm a member of. And one of the topics we were looking at was really some introspection about what we wanted to do differently in the year ahead, really the remaining 3 quarters, and what were the biggest barriers to us getting there. And for me, I started out with what I felt like it was pretty introspective at the time, but it was pretty shallow. I was looking at really the symptoms of what I later figured out was just a lack of general discipline. And for me, I've always struggled with being overweight. Like since I was 12 years old, I've always been overweight and always struggled with dieting and stuff like that. And it's been a constant battle for me. One that it's been embarrassing and it's been frustrating, and it just sucks, and it's my own fault. I got some bad genetics in there somewhere, but it's definitely not the fault of genetics, what I eat or how much I exercise. And I, through a lot of growing up, though, I always kind of I did consider myself to be a disciplined person because, man, I worked harder than anybody out there. I was going to get better grades than anybody in my peer group, or at least some pretty darn good ones. When I got to Hillsdale, there's some folks I just was never going to beat. But I wanted to get to be really competitive and very disciplined. So whether it was in my shooting sports background, in rifle competition, in shotgun, whether it was in orchestra, and practicing for long hours, whether it was working on the farm, whatever it was, especially then when it came to politics, I wanted to be the best at it, or the best at least that I could. And so I was very disciplined. I sacrificed a lot, even as far as relationships and stuff later on in my teenage years and stuff, in order to be able to focus on those things. And so I consider myself disciplined. But as I was going through that weekend of introspection, the question that came into my mind was, if you are very disciplined in half your life, does that make you a disciplined person if you are undisciplined in the other half? And you can play with those percentages to be whatever fits your situation, but what I came to see was that, at least in my own case, that even though I was just very disciplined in a decent percentage of my life, because I had such a lack of discipline, particularly on the personal side, with my weight and what I was eating and how I was taking care of myself and a lot of those similar areas, that I was not a disciplined person. And it was kind of a identity shock for a few minutes, because I was like, man, I've always considered myself disciplined, yet I've just discovered I'm not. What does that mean? And as I really thought and prayed more about it and kind of shared that with some of the guys I was with, I started to figure out, look, discipline is really one of the most important things that I've said I wanted to pass down to my son, Stoney. That if there's one thing I could do, the one thing that I could pass down to him, it would be that he is disciplined. That's both because of the success I've seen it bring other people and bring me in the limited spheres that I've allowed it to take root, as well as because of the frustrations and downsides that I've seen through not having discipline in other parts of my life. It's like, well, if that's the number one thing I want to pass on to him, then I probably better get better at this. And so in the moments, or the weeks rather, coming forward from that weekend, I kind of started putting a plan into place to really take that on. Now, nothing I've done so far is brand new. I've done all these things before, and they've not stuck. So what's going to make them stick this time? Well, one, I think having my son and having this stuff front of mind on a daily basis is going to help with my motivation. But two, there's talking about it publicly like this. This is always a good thing, because now I've told you guys I'm doing it, so I better stick with it. Or I have to own up at some point when somebody asks me, hey man, how you doing? But I've also surrounded myself and asked some friends and family members of mine and guys in my accountability group to ask me about it on a regular basis. Because if I don't stay on top of this can have negative impacts on my life that either I nor they want to see happen. So, frankly, this happened kind of in early April. Most of April and May were honestly survival months. With Stoney and teething and not sleeping and stuff, it was really about starting to kind of right the ship, because both my wife and I had really let Stoney and his lack of schedule kind of, the tail was wagging the dog. And I think anybody that's had kids can understand. I think everybody hits that point. And we kind of got to the point where the inmate was running the asylum, and we had to get things set right. And so we gradually started to moving him on a better schedule and trying to deal with together the things that were keeping us from feeling like we could get on a regular schedule of getting up early and those kind of things. And so that was one of the first things I wanted to get us to do as we reached the point where it was, we were getting even a few hours of sleep a night, was I wanted to get us to where we're waking up earlier. And Jocko, he's always up at 4:30. I started at 6 and I backed it up to 5:30. I'm getting up at about 5 every morning, even weekends now. And that's probably where I'm going to stick for the time being. In June, rather than trying to jump fully into having a very regimented day, I started just with the exercise side. So I was like, I'm going to get up at 5:30 every morning, and I'm going to make sure I get some kind of exercise in. So I just got my dog Thor back from the trainer. He was like an awesome brand new dog. He could go off leash anywhere, so it was a lot of fun to go walk. So I go on a walk, or go to ruck, or go to CrossFit, and every single day I was doing something. And so I set that goal, and I was doing at least half an hour of exercise, even if it was light, every single day. And that was what I did in June. And this month, here in July, I added in a lot more. I use a book called The Full Focus Planner that Michael Hyatt put together. And I kind of have a hybrid productivity system between what he uses with the very analog version of the book, which it's awesome. And I use Todoist and and Google Calendar for a lot of my daily organization and making sure I'm staying on track with all my different to-dos. So I use the hybrid system there. But in Hyatt's book, one of the things that he does that I really like is he breaks down your days into what he calls several rituals. And his theory is that by starting and ending your personal day and your work day with a set of standard tasks, that by injecting that little bit of organization into what can otherwise be a chaotic day, you're going to have a higher level of success and productivity. And I had done that some at the beginning of the year, but kind of fallen off with that as we were kind of letting Stoney and his schedule run our lives. And as we were getting back to being able to get up, making sure I got up early every day, I decided that I was going to get back on using those rituals. And so for me, let me pull up my list here, and I'll kind of give you guys an idea of what I do. And I've got all of these things set up on a daily recurring basis in my Todoist calendar, so that the times when I expect to have them done, they're going to pop up in my, on my phone, and I'm a Apple Watch, and I'll mark them down as complete, and they recur every day. So first thing in the morning is I'm going to get up and I'm going to take my vitamins. I got them all laid out because I've been historically terrible about actually taking supplements. So take my vitamins. I always have a liter of water on my bedside table. I have a bottle I carry with me pretty much everywhere. So I'm going to finish that first liter that I've been drinking on over the night, and I'm getting my Yeti full of coffee brewing. I'm going to probably hit the restroom and read my devotional. I use Charles Haddon Spurgeon's Morning and Evening. It's what I typically read. And some Psalms or Proverbs or something. And say some prayers. I'm then going to jump into physical exercise. So I'll get the dog out. And I have about a 3.2 mile loop. And I've been cutting it down a little bit the last couple of days because my knee's been bothering me. But I've got, depending on how much time I've got, I got a 3.2, a 4, or a 6 mile kind of loop that I can do with Thor. And we have a blast, and it's good to get out there and get my sweat on. After that, I'll typically get home, and while I'm cooling down, I'm gonna read for 20 minutes. and I'm going to journal for 10 minutes. And this was something that I learned as I was listening to some Gary Vaynerchuk, I think is who it was, a while back, was I'd always put down, read and journal on my things I want to do on a daily basis. But I got into it and I felt like if I didn't do it for some number of pages or significant period of time, that I wasn't going to really, it didn't count somehow. And so I'd end up just not doing it because I felt like if I don't have the time to dedicate to really diving in here, then what's the point? But I started putting a time limit on it, and I literally will set a timer, and I'm usually on my phone, and I will sit down and I'll read. And the idea is that I have a set amount of time that I'm going to fit all these parts to my morning ritual into, so that I'm able to still spend time with my family before 9 o'clock rolls around and I officially start working. And so after reading for 20 minutes, journaling for 10 minutes, sometimes I'll write in a journal that I have that's kind of basically letters to my son, just kind of notes and stuff I'm telling him about when he was growing up or what I was going through at this point in his life and mine. Lessons. I was writing about discipline the other day. That's part of what made me think about doing this. And from there, I'll sometimes also just put notes in my full focus planner as I'm going through there, ideas, whatever kind of comes to mind about work or just myself or my personal situation. I then got a time block to write for about 15 minutes on My Campaign Coach stuff. Sometimes it's the My Campaign Coach Minute podcast. I write some from that. Sometimes it's a blog article. Sometimes it's responding to emails. But I have a finite amount of time on that. So that's the morning ritual. That's the stuff that I do for me every day. And typically that takes me from about 5 a.m. to about 8:30. 8 or 8:30 rather. And so then I've got time. I'm showered enough and everything by that point, so I'm able to hang out with my little man when he gets up at 8:30 and have some coffee with my wife and be able to roll out to work at 9. Thankfully, since my commute is to my backyard and in my office back here, I don't have to factor a whole lot of commute time in there. When it comes to the morning dive, though, this workday startup, for me, I start out by finalizing my daily goals and my big 3. So part of Michael Hyatt's theory is that you should have the 3 things you want to get done, the biggest things every week and every day, and make sure that most of what you do is focused on those. So I'm going to finalize those first thing, make sure that whatever I put down from the previous day still sticks. Then I'm going to triage my email, just making sure that I've got everything put into Todoist. If there's an email there, I'm going to assign that an action. If it takes more than 2 minutes long, I'm going to put it into my to-do list. If it takes less than 2 minutes, I'm going to respond to it or moving on down the line. I've got a series of blogs that I have in an RSS reader called Feedly that I check out to make sure that's all good. And then I'm ready to rock and roll through the day. I really try to minimize the amount of time that I spend on email throughout the day. I'll have a block about noon or so that I'll check it. But I really try to make sure that the email is not distracting me. Especially in the job I have right now, I'm not getting whipped around by email as far as it changing the way my day works in most cases. So I typically ignore it for at least a couple hours and will then deal with it in a batch. Towards the end of the day, I really work to get back to email inbox 0 across the board and to make sure that all my to-do lists and everything are updated for the next day. When it comes to shutting down my day, I try to have the lights out by 10. Since I'm getting up at 5, and I'm trying to get into bed about 9, and that allows some time for me to lay there and read. Got 30 minutes of reading. I have some time to talk about the wins with my wife, what our day was like, and the good things, the bad things, and get to pray with her before we go to bed. Take my evening vitamins and make sure my water bottle's full, and do a perimeter check and let the dogs out one last time. All that wraps up into my, kind of my daily rituals. And what I've found, just even the last couple of weeks of doing that with regularity, is there's so much throughout our days that we can't control. But by injecting those little bits of discipline, just saying, I'm going to do this today. I'm going to do this every day. And just by doing that, that helps us become more disciplined. And by having those small wins, every time I check one of those off my to-do list, even though they're small, like taking my vitamins, reading for 20 minutes, checking the back, checking the doors, stuff like that. Those are things that are going to get done in many cases either way. But the fact that I'm recognizing it, and frankly, I'm enough of a nerd that that's a reward for me. I have that reward center in my brain gets triggered when I get to mark something off my to-do list. By doing that, it helps reinforce those things in my mind. And if my goal is to become more disciplined, to lose weight, to live a healthier life, to get more done in my day, to allow email to be less controlling in my life, to make sure that I'm actually being productive and focused rather than just being busy, then I need every advantage I can get. I think that if you take a real inventory of your life and have an honest assessment like I did a couple months ago about whether you're disciplined or not, I think that you're going to come up and probably come on the side of that I'm at least not as disciplined as I'd like to be and as I should be. And when we look at running for political office, adding these kind of stresses to our family life, just wanting to be more engaged and have a bigger impact, we can't get more hours in our day. We probably can't get that much more money than we currently have access to. That's a long-term thing. But if we want to, in the short term, increase our output somehow, I think that being more disciplined is the number one way that we can achieve that. So when I look at any other input to in my life that's going to determine my productivity, the amount of discipline that I exert over myself is probably the number one that comes to mind. I really have, as I thought about it the last couple of days, I just can't think of one that's is under my control that will exercise a bigger short-term or long-term impact. And so that's why I'm trying to pass it on to my son and why I'm trying to get so much better at it myself. It's because I've sucked at it for so long and I didn't even realize it. How crazy is that? I really thought that I was a disciplined person when I was running around without discipline in some very big parts of my life. As a little bit of further justification for some of these ideas, I also recently read Jordan Peterson's book, 12 Rules for Life, and it's a really good book. I highly recommend. And as I was talking about building out my diet to be, lower carb, higher in fats and proteins, and talking about getting up earlier, he provided some scientific proof behind doing that I've really found encouraging. He's a clinical psychologist, and he said that in his experience, that virtually all people who have come to him with clinical level symptoms for depression or anxiety, that by doing two things, he has been able to reduce their symptoms to below clinical levels. So they might still have some significant issues, but it's not clinical, like about to get you committed type stuff. And so the first thing is, he asks his patients when they get up in the morning. And he said it doesn't really matter to him when, as long as it's roughly the same time every day. He said that determines in large part with your circadian rhythms and how you're going to operate throughout the day. That's really key in making sure that you are operating at peak efficiency. That messing up your schedule and your body and your mind by waking up at different times of the day and going to bed at different times of the day, that's a big, big thing that helps increase your anxiety and lessens your amount of control you have over your life. So step one is to make sure you're waking up the same time every day. In my case, I like getting up early and being able to have so much of my personal to-do list and have my workout and a bunch of other stuff done before it's time for work in the morning. And that just makes me feel like a rock star before my coffee's even cold. The second thing Peterson talked about was eating a high protein, high fat, low carb diet, or as far as your breakfast. He's like, man, if you start your day off with donuts or some really sugar-rich smoothie or something like that, he said you're basically setting yourself up for basically a diabetic crash mid-morning. And that because of what that does to you, that high and then crash on sugar, that it cannot be reset until you actually sleep for a significant amount of time, like over 30 minutes to an hour. And I don't understand all the science behind that, but effectively you're just screwing up your day, and there's no way to reset it until you go back to sleep. So starting off your day by putting yourself into that kind of diabetic coma effectively is a bad idea. I would love to hear from you guys about what your thoughts on all this are, because this has been probably one of the least scripted episodes that I've done on the podcast, even in my monologues. But I think there are other folks out there that are struggling with this. And I would love to learn more about how you guys are overcoming this, if you're even trying to. If you're not, tell me why you're not. What is it that makes you happy with living an undisciplined life? In my experience, those kind of people aren't happy. Like it was my situation. Now, generally, I'd say I was happy, but the fact is that I was not happy with my weight. I wasn't happy with how I looked. Still not. And I sure wasn't going to be happy about the amount of productivity I was getting done with my life. I was doing pretty good, but I wanted to be better. The problem was that I wasn't taking the steps necessary to get better. And there's going to be plenty of setbacks and probably plenty of failures as I move forward here, and I'm definitely not going to lose the weight I want to as fast as I'd like and all that kind of stuff. I'm really trying to be very regimented and disciplined about how I'm adding to my plate and how I'm making these changes, trying to make sure they're bite-sized and there's something I can do long-term. I don't want to just lose a bunch of weight and then put it back on. I want to be able to make the life-changing decisions that are small, that are like the taking your vitamins and drinking more water every day, and see the long-term results of those yield. So I'd love to hear some feedback from you guys. I know that I'm not alone in my realizations or my struggles, and I would love to hear from you guys as far as what you're doing to fight these battles as well. Like I said at the beginning, guys, if you are interested in helping us out, there are a couple things you can do to do that. Number one, we would love to get more ratings on iTunes and Facebook. A 5-star would be great. If it's not a 5-star that you feel like we deserve, give us something else, but tell us why. Tell me why. Tell me why you don't think we deserve a 5, or tell us why the 5 is exactly what we deserve. I want the feedback, and this is a huge help to us as we're going into the summer, and there are so many people looking for podcasts to listen to. The iTunes charts are a fickle master, and so I've had some days, I literally had one day in January, nothing changed from my perspective, but somehow iTunes decided to feature the podcast on one of their front pages. We literally got 1,000 downloads in a day. Now, I have no idea what happened. No way to figure out what that was. I'd like for it to happen again, though. And the only thing I know to help make sure those things are happening and that we're getting more and more public attention is for you guys to rate us, to share this information, to keep downloading and subscribe. So that help is fantastic, and I really appreciate it. If you guys are interested in helping support the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/mycampaigncoach. JD and Grant have already signed up to help start the ball rolling on this and are get to have some pretty cool perks, and by which I mean more time with me, and ask their own questions and get to have some new products they'll get to test for us. But would love to have y'all support. It makes a big difference in the economics of this podcast and helping us make sure we can keep putting out rock-solid content in perpetuity. So God bless you guys. Hope you have a fantastic week, and I look forward to hearing from y'all very soon.
Please subscribe and rate us on iTunes to help spread the word. We'll be back with you next week with more campaign insights from My Campaign Coach.